oof with Ali was when she was like, I'm not like the other girls. I am short and I have brown hair and I have big tits. I have a double D. Quack.
Welcome to the Little Duck Book Club with duck number 1,
Ren, and duck number 2,
Anna. Yeah, we have another firsts today.
Yeah, losing all our firsts this year. It's like, it's truly going.
Talking about a Christina Henry book we didn't like.
Yeah, it turns out now we've read a book we both thought we would like and ended up not really liking that much at all.
It's like going through all of the options that exist.
Yeah, it really is just like, finally a book that lets us experience the 5 stages of grief. Love that for us.
So the book we're talking about is Good Girls Don't Die by Christina Henry, and it's one of her horror books.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I guess they're all kind of horror adjacent.
Yeah, not
even the retellings, but this is not.
It's an original story.
Yeah, it's not even remotely related to any of the fairy tales her retellings, but this is just full on original. And maybe that's the problem.
But Near the Bone isn't full. It's like
that's
also
true. Near the Bone's good,
right?
Which makes this so strange. It's like, how can the same person have written both of these books?
So what is it about? There's on the blurb is telling us, there's like 3 different stories of like horror settings, and somehow they intertwine. So obviously both of us were excited to read it. And I read it first, and I was like, we have to read this for the book club, because, something happens, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. And then you bought it as well.
Yeah, I was like, well, I love reading Christina Henry books. I'm totally up for doing another one for the podcast. And then it was like, oh, that's why you said you wanted to talk about it. Because at first, when you told me about it, you were just like, I have a lot of thoughts. Yeah. And I was unprepared that these thoughts would be not positive. I just thought it was like, there's fun twists. It's the opposite, actually. There are unfun twists.
It didn't even feel like a twist. It felt like...
No, it's not that twisty, you're right.
It's quite... I don't know. It's quite bland in the way it sets everything up. And let's maybe...
Yeah. Unlike other books, I'm not even gonna say you have to go out and read this before we talk about it, because it's not bad. I would not put this in the, this is a terrible book draw. But it's also, I don't think, really worth the time it takes to read. Like, a third of it is good, and then it keeps going downhill. And it never comes back up.
A third is good. A third is really good.
Yeah, I'd say first third. It gets you at the beginning.
And then the second story is like, okay, I'm getting a bit annoyed. And I got very annoyed. So when the third story came around, I was like, this is kind of better than the second one in a way. But due to everything happened so far, I'm the least entertained.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe let's just go through each of the stories.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because from now on it only gets worse. So
the book has 4 parts, 3 of which are all about a different female protagonist
scenarios,
who's stuck in some sort of like tension-filled scenario. I'm not even gonna call it horror, because the third one isn't horror to me. Like,
it's a different horror, I'd say.
I guess being in the situation would be horrific.
Yeah.
But also, as a genre, I don't think it really... The horror doesn't come through as much because it's much more action-oriented.
I don't read that much horror, so I don't really know what constitutes as like a...
I mean, I guess my take on it, that nothing about it was like scary or suspenseful. It was, if somebody... It just feels like, how an action story feels, where like... Yeah, if a real person were to experience this would be kind of scary, I guess.
Yeah.
But there is no tension of like wonder what's going to happen to you. You're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna die if I fuck this up, but it's, you know...
No, I get that, yeah.
So I don't know if I would call it horror, but certainly scenarios. And then there's a fourth part in which they're all brought together.
Yeah, it's called, I think, Everybody Together, literally. Or All Together,
yeah.
I think.
Before the chapters are named after the main characters. So, first part of the book.
And honestly, in my opinion, the most relatable character.
Yeah.
Because, like, with her thoughts and everything, and also her thoughts during the fourth part.
Yeah.
Is also, like, most relatable. Our girl, Celia.
Yeah.
Celia just, like, comes into consciousness while standing in the kitchen and preparing food for a child that she doesn't recognize as her child in the house she doesn't recognize as her house, but it's not like she's like, oh, I am in the wrong house. It's more like a
I don't
displacement.
Know what my house would be like.
Yeah.
But this doesn't feel like my house.
It feels like they did a factory reset on her, and she wakes up from that factory
reset.
Remembers
nothing.
Yeah.
And is put into the suburban family house with a child whining for her to finish her school lunch so she can leave and catch the bus. And Celia's just like, I don't know who this kid is, but you know what? I'm not gonna admit to not knowing what's going on.
She just goes with it.
Because I don't trust like that.
Yeah.
So she's just going with the flow, trying to not be super suspicious.
There's a man in the house who's, like, seems to be her husband. He tries to kiss her, you know, he's all loving and stuff. And, like, well, he's not like a...
He's the kind of husband where it's like, oh, they got married and maybe they used to be in love, but they're very perfunctory about their interactions.
Yeah, there's, like, a routine. But he tries to do the typical kiss on the cheek.
Yeah.
Honey, I'm taking her to school. See you later, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There might be some love lost between them at some point.
Yeah, it's like, well, maybe. There used to be something, but Celia's just, I don't know this man.
Yeah.
And I don't know this house, and I don't know this child, and I don't think I live here.
And he says, see you later at the restaurant. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, in her head, of course, she doesn't say that.
Like, what restaurant?
Yeah.
And then it turns out she's the owner of, like, a family-owned restaurant.
An Italian restaurant.
Yeah, an Italian restaurant. And she's the owner and, like, the mainline cook. She does most of the
heavy lifting
cooking and, like, does the recipes and stuff. And so she goes to the restaurant.
And it feels like some of the steps she does in the restaurant feel familiar in a way that everything else doesn't.
Yeah.
So she's like...
She's definitely like, okay, I do cook and I know this.
Yeah.
This is familiar.
So it doesn't feel like too alien. Like there's this inkling of, you know, maybe this is my life. Because obviously something about this feels familiar to me.
Something about this is...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So she goes through the prep. Someone else comes in, talks to her. She feels like all the conversations are kind of a little off-key. Like, they're talking a bit past each other. Like, she's missing cues she's supposed to be hitting.
It's very TV show kind of.
Yeah, she constantly is like, this feels like I'm in a story. This doesn't feel like a real-life conversation. Because it feels like people are dropping expository information on her, and it's just kind of unnatural. But she's also like, well, I don't remember anything, so maybe this is normal.
Yeah, and it's like, for example, the line cook comes in, and they argue, or like bicker about which, like, dish to make, and the cook goes, oh, jolly, you know, like, you will never tell me the recipe of the secret sauce. And she's like, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
What
like,
the
is
fuck?
This a bit we're normally doing? I don't know.
It was so weird. And then somebody knocks on her door, and it's her elderly neighbor, or like the person that
lives next to the restaurant.
Yeah. And Mrs. Corrigan. And she's also like cartoonishly...
She's cartoonishly aggressive. She's decked out in pink.
Yeah.
She's just typecast for like an angry elderly lady. She's like
rollers
I have
still in her
rodents under my house because of your disgusting trash restaurant. She is so mad about Italian cuisine.
Yeah.
It feels like a strange, like, out of time experience. It's like, I think people stopped being racist about Italians in the US, like, in the 50s and 60s.
She didn't.
Yeah, apparently she didn't. She really was just like, you're disgusting foreign food and your ways. And I was just like, this is truly incomprehensible.
Yeah. And, like, apparently this is, like, a standing problem because people around her give her these weird cues that this is something that happens a lot of times. And there's this instance where Miss Corrigan kind of puts her hand close to her face, and then Celia just, like, swats it away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the spark for Miss Corrigan to go, you will regret assaulting me. And then she leaves.
Yeah, and then we find out her nephew's on the police force, and that's why she gets away with a lot of stuff, because she can just sick him on people.
Yeah.
And he does it because he wants her inheritance, so he's being nice with her. And he's also an asshole who hates Italian food.
And who was in high school with her or something.
Yeah,
like...
no, he was, like, in high school with her line cook. And she turned him down for the prom or something, and he's still mad about it. He's, like, in his 30s.
It's so weird.
It's utterly inappropriate to still be mad about this.
And, like, there's this whole scene afterwards where the policeman comes in with his with Miss Corrigan, and she has a black eye, and the story spun is that Celia attacked her and, like, punched her in the face, like, decked her basically.
Yeah, and it's like, I didn't do that.
And so there's, like, a setup going on. And then the day goes over, you know, her husband drops by in the middle, gets some lasagna and stuff, and she still feels weird. Like, the feeling that she had since the beginning of the day is not being shaken off. Like, it's still there. And then she takes care of the restaurant. She feels kind of safe because nobody's there anymore, so she's like, oh, finally, I'm alone. And she goes out to take the trash out, I think.
Yeah.
And is like, oh... there's a weird noise. I shouldn't go, but I don't know. And she goes to the big dumpsters, and there's Mrs. Corrigan.
Throat slit open.
Yeah.
You can see the tendons. Very gory. Smells terrible.
Dead.
And she's just like, oh no.
Yeah. And she calls the police. Police come. This time it's not the Lyle Corrigan policeman, but it's another one who also had a very comic name, like McSquatchy or something. Bob McCockswatch. I don't know. It was a weird name.
It was like, the whole setup is like, she's like, this is like one of those, like, mystery stories.
Yeah,
where, like,
yeah. It feels...
small town.
It feels weird. And the first, like, big clue she has for herself is that while she's waiting for the police to come, for her husband to come, nobody of the surrounding houses also comes out.
There are no gawkers. Nobody turning on the light and standing in their window. Nobody standing around looking
like it's a
what
dead
is
street.
going on. It's all silent. Nothing is happening.
And she thinks that's, like, extremely weird.
Yeah, throughout the day she has had flashes where she's like, oh, this isn't like that. Like, where I live, it's not like this. And she's like, okay, I'm pretty sure I don't live there. And in that moment, she's also like, oh, at home, this would never happen.
Yeah.
At home, there'd be, like, a mass of people. And she'd be like,
yeah.
Oh, I don't think I live here. I think something's wrong.
And then, like, with that, you know, feeling, her husband takes her home. And
before that, it turns out her husband is, like, a defense attorney.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, defending her from Lyle Corrigan, who's, like, crazy aggressive.
Yeah.
But she's also like, I don't trust this man because I don't know him and I think something's wrong. And she refuses to get into his car and drives home by herself, even though everybody else is like, hey,
you're
you know, you're not doing so great.
She's like, no, the car needs to go home as well. Yeah, like, I'm taking, it's fine.
It's not far, it's fine.
Yeah. They arrive home and she goes in, and inside of the house is, like, a blonde woman,
a woman
her
she
age.
Doesn't know.
And she had gotten, I think, a message or a call earlier
phone
in the
call
morning
thing,
by a person called Jenny on her phone, who was like, hey, want to go for a run? And that was already a first clue. She's like, I'm not a running person. And she, like, deduces that this is Jenny inside their house, because her maybe husband, I think Peter, he needed to find somebody to babysit their daughter before he could get to her. And it just, all of the oddities are stacking up. You know, she doesn't remember this woman. This woman gets out white wine
for her, and she's like, I never drink white wine. I hate it. I only drink red. And the woman's like, oh yeah, we should go running again tomorrow. And she's like, I do not run. I have never liked running. Leave me the fuck alone with this fucking running. I'm not going to do it.
And she doesn't say it with that intensity, but she's like, no, I'm not feeling the run. She's very
secure and like, I am not a running person. I hate being sweaty. I hate doing it.
And, you know, Jenny is like, oh, maybe the shock or something. You know, we'll talk again tomorrow. I feel like... And she's like, no, we'll not talk tomorrow. I don't think I want to run. And she's like, oh, no, it's... You know what? And then she sees Pete coming into the driveway. She's like, oh, Pete is here. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
And then she goes out. The friend goes out. And our main character...
Celia
she eavesdrops
positions
on them
herself so she can
very strategically.
And they have an incredibly, like, incriminating conversation where they're like, she told me she didn't like running. She's not supposed to say that. And he's like, maybe she needs another dose. I didn't think this would wear off this fast.
Maybe needs to be stronger.
And Celia's like, oh my god, what the fuck is happening?
What fucking dose? He comes in. She's like, okay, I'm in enemy territory. I need to be smart about this. So she tells him, oh no, you know, I want to stay up a little bit more. And he's like, oh, you know, like trying to be like the nice, sympathetic husband, sets her up with some snacks and like a blanket on the couch. And he goes upstairs while she watches some sort, like he tries to test her a little bit, asking her what kind of trash TV she wants to watch.
Yeah, and about like the contents, and she like... has good enough answers that he can't like
that he like doesn't
point anything out. But they're both doing the whole
the taxing
suspicious
each other out. Yeah. And then she kind of like napped away or something. She
almost falls asleep. And she's like, I can't fall asleep here. I'm gonna turn up like the music somewhere, and like I'm gonna turn up the volume. I'm gonna get a snack from the kitchen. Turns out they only have like prepackaged food, which she hates. She like eats some Doritos, and she's like, the flavors is the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. But while she goes to the kitchen, she hears him
coming down the stairs.
Not coming down the stairs, like standing at the landing
at the
upstairs.
Banister,
like she can hear it, and she's just like, okay, he's waiting for me to fall asleep. I can't.
Yeah, we're just waiting to see what she does as well. Like, is she gonna leave right now? So he's like gauging, like, what is she gonna do? And then, as you said, she gets the snacks. She makes enough of a ruckus and like hums and sings like something. So he thinks, oh, she's just
she's just having a moment.
She's not leaving or trying to run away. She's just getting snacks. And then later on, she realizes, oh, he must have thought that she is fine. And like he let off her hook, and I don't remember whether she actually naps or whether she does stay awake, but she then sneaks out of the house.
Yeah, she stays awake. She collects her keys, her phone, sneaks out to her car, and the moment she turns it on, she sees like
the light
in the bedroom go on and him at the window, and she just like drives off.
Yeah. And she drives off to the restaurant because she feels like that's...
before that, she steals his restaurant key.
Yeah.
She checks in with his key ring, compares, and is like, okay, I'm taking his restaurant key, so he can't get in there while I'm in there. And she arrives, and she immediately falls asleep. Yeah. She locks herself in, and she's like...
into a closet. She noticed during the day that there's, like, a change of clothes. She's like, okay, this is like, secure. And then, she immediately falls asleep. And the next day, she's like, okay, this is...
There are, like... 20 voice messages from Pete.
He tries calling her, and she tries to play it off. She was like, oh, I'm just so shocked and like stressed, and I'm at the restaurant. You don't need to worry. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Playing it off. And then she's like, I have some investigating to do. So she...
But also, like, one of the funny parts is when... During his voicemails, at first, he's, like, trying to be understanding, but then he gets real aggressive, and he's like, who's gonna prepare lunch for our daughter? Mm-hmm. She's just like, dude, it's a piece of toast with some cheese on it.
Do it yourself.
You can do this. It's not hard. And, yeah, so she's like, okay, I cannot trust anyone.
Yeah. Not this even, like, the people who are, like, trying to be nice to me in another way. Mm.
So she investigates a bit in the kitchen. She's like, okay, I feel like I'm being surveilled. Finds a hidden camera.
Like the TV show vibes kind of like get stronger. She's like, yeah, I'm being watched. And there's like this whole thing where she's like, oh, she like lets something fall to the ground so she can...
It's like, oh, I accidentally knocked it over. Oopsie. And then she's like, oh no, there was a camera.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
She's like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is not... I'm not like having an episode or something.
Yeah.
There's generally something happening. And she then decides to go out and investigate Mrs. Corrigan's house. Since that was the neighboring plot, she goes over the fence. She walks up to the house and it's open, it's not locked. She's a bit weirded out by that.
Yeah, there was no police tape. Yeah. The police didn't check her house, which is strange.
Yeah, like no tire marks.
She feels anything. Like they ought to have done that, given that she was murdered.
Yeah.
But not in the dumpster. Somebody dragged her into the dumpster, so like probably killed her. So she's in the house, and the house, just like Mrs. Corrigan, is like incredibly pink to a cartoonish degree. Yeah. She's like, this is weird. And she, like, looks at the surfaces and it's like, this feels empty. This doesn't feel lived in at all. There's dust on the surfaces. And then she starts opening other doors. Like, she gets out of, like, the main room because she came in through, like, the back door and the veranda. So, and then she opens the door and, like, the bedroom is just empty. There's no bed. There's nothing.
She goes to the next level in the house.
Yeah. All the rooms are empty, unlived in. No one lives in this house. There's nothing there.
And she's like, yeah, this is empty. And then she just, like, books it.
Yeah, that's when she, like, leaves her phone. She's like, they can probably track my phone. I can't take the car because there's probably a tracker in the car. She just starts running off.
And then while she's, like stumbling, bumbling around, not really knowing where to run, she turns around and she sees, like, a group of men just standing there, and they all have, like, gear and shit.
Yeah, 20 men in black clothes, like, behind her on the
other side of the
street. Yeah. Like, coming after her, and she's like, ooh, I am leaving!
Yeah, and then, like, there's a short moment of, huh? And then she's, like, running through a forest, and she doesn't know where to go. It's hard running through this forest. She hates running, as we know. She's like, I'm definitely not a runner. This is not something I do. And then the forest stops. And after the forest, after a little bit of clearing, there's just a gigantic white wall, with a door that says exit.
And she runs through.
And she's like, well, yeah.
Well, I'm not going back there. These people are behind me.
Exit!
If there's a door, I am taking it. And that's where her section stops.
That's where the first section stops. That's when we start with the next person.
Yeah.
Who is,
what we haven't mentioned before is that every chapter
that's important.
Starts with a few lines of chat log.
Yeah.
Which gives you a lot of context into what's happening. Because for the first one, you start with a chat log of people discussing cozy mysteries and, like, how they would love to live in one of those small towns with, like, the murders. Like, cozy mysteries, if you're not familiar, are the types of mysteries a la, Miss Marple, where it's, like, it's a small town, not a lot of suspects. There's, like, it's a lot of interpersonal drama.
It's not high stakes.
No, it's not high stakes, and usually the murders aren't, like, super bloody or brutal.
Yeah.
It's, like, relatively low stakes. Usually it doesn't relate at all to, like, politics or anything like that. It's mostly really just a fun puzzle to work through.
Yeah.
So they're talking about, I'd love to live in, like, a town like that. Yeah, have a little family restaurant. Oh, I could totally solve one of those murders. I would love to be an investigator there. and then you have a really annoying person in the chat being like, oh yeah, then prove it. And, you know, I'm sure every listener can already see, like, the implications here. It's not difficult. It's hard to overstate how little this book deals in subtlety on any level the further you get into it.
Yeah.
It really...
I picked out the last chat thing, because while they're talking about this, and it's people with like normal usernames, this guy TYZ7412 shows up and like starts to, you know, a typical disruptive Reddit user.
Yeah.
And the last text is, so you're not actually serious, typical woman, full of bullshit. And then somebody called Mystery BK Love says, well, okay, thought we were just having a fun discussion here. And other people kind of chime in and are like, yeah, the fuck what you're saying. And the other user says, I want to know if that bitch can actually do what she says or if she's all talk. I want to know if she can actually solve a mystery better than the police. I want to see you prove it. And then the other user was like, I don't have anything to prove to you. This discussion is over.
Yeah, bitch, you're blocked.
And you're blocked. So that's pretty damning in terms of what's happening. There's a person that's saying, I think you're a dumb bitch.
And, like, that is already pretty on the nose. Even with the first chat log where she's just like, oh, I'd love to live in a small town and have a family. Right?
Yeah.
And you're immediately like, okay, this chat log wouldn't be here if it weren't related to the story. And it becomes pretty obvious that, like, okay, she got somehow put into a cozy mystery.
And I feel like that's not a bad thing to set up.
Not at all.
Because it still leaves the mystery of how did she get there?
Why is she here? How did she get it? What's going to happen when she figures it out? Like, what is going on?
When I first read that, I was like, oh, is it a supernatural thing?
Yeah, I was also like, oh, is there gonna be, like, some horror element that's like... oh, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like, and I was like, okay, let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
Some sort of, like, I don't know, like, entity feeding on people getting stuck in stories or whatever. Like, just something, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, let's see where this goes. But then I was like, okay. After the second story, I was just like, okay.
Want to go into the second story before we get into the whole, like, everything?
Yeah, we'll quickly do, like, a summary, and then we'll talk opinions.
Quickly, we're already at half an hour again. So the second story...
I think the second also doesn't need as much.
No, it doesn't need as much.
Because it's so tropey.
So the second story starts with our main character called Allie. She wakes up from a nap in a car, and she's in the car with 4 other people. 2 couples, heterosexual couples, so 3 girls in total and 2 guys. And she's there with her, like, kind of best friend-ish, like it's this...
Yeah, the 2 girls are, like, her besties, but also they kind of treat her really badly.
Yeah.
Like, she describes it as, like, oh yeah, sometimes when we hang out together, like, they gang up on me, and, like...
It's, like, this typical kind of toxic, I would say, girl relationship you can have during high school, where you're like, I don't know.
But it's not high school, they're in college.
Yeah, and it stays,
they're
right?
adults.
You have it during high school, this weird dynamic gets established there, and it just stays.
And Allie's like, well, I'm bad at making friends, and I also don't really care that much about hanging out with people, so whenever I need company, these people are there to hang out with, so we're friends. And the 2 boys are their boyfriends. One of them is like...
Brad and Chad, no?
Yeah, Brad and...
Steve.
Brad is like trust fund baby 101. He's like, crazy rich. He's a huge piece of shit.
Like the jock.
You look at him and you're like, oh, this man is for sure abusing his girlfriend. If he's not yet hitting her, he will be at some point.
You cover your drink, you know, when he walks
You're like,
by.
the way he looks at women, you're like, oh, this man, if he hasn't raped anyone yet, he's working up to it. Yeah. It's just a matter of time. It's not a question of if. Like, you can read him like a book.
really icky guy.
Yeah. And Steve is, like, his little hanger-on. They're, like, bros. They hang out together. Steve is a little more bearable. Yeah. He doesn't come across quite as, like, unpleasant interpersonally. But, like, he's like a stooge. He's a good goon. He does what Brad, like, says.
Yeah.
He just goes along. He's like... It's like when a terrible person has, like, a dog that loves them, and you're like, the dog's just not very bright, you know? You know this person... You know this guy would chuck the dog into a wood chipper if he, like, profited from it. But he keeps the dog around because he likes that the dog loves him so much. Yeah. Like, that's the vibe I'm getting. Steve is like, we're besties. And Brad's like, yeah, this is Steve. He does shit for me. Like, right?
Yeah.
That's the energy.
It's similar for the girls. Yeah. Brad's girlfriend, Cam, is kind of like the Regina George. You know, she's blonde, she's sexy, she's hot.
Tall, blonde, long legs. She's
like in accordance with her Swedish roots, you know. It's like she's very like
she's the all that American girl, whatever, right?
And the Madison.
Yeah, her hanger on Madison is like, oh, she's also blonde and tall and thin, but she's less tall and less blonde. And
she says like a more paler version.
Yeah, she's like a washed out version.
Yeah, washed out version is what they say.
She's like, she has less personality and force, and, you know, she's also a good goon. She sides with Cam whenever.
And she's like, that was when I started to cringe while reading it. Allie is like, it seems like the alphas and the betas have like perfectly paired off. What does that make me? An omega?
Yeah, Allie is difficult because Allie is not like other girls. And in some ways, this is like understandable. Again, she's also like, I'm not like other people. Yeah. She doesn't really hang out. She's very closed off. She's a huge horror geek. And that's interesting characterization, but the longer you read about her, like, she's like, oh, I have these friends who don't treat me right, but also I really don't have other friends either who would treat me better. Like, I don't really have alternatives. And, like, I am cranky about it, but I'm like a people pleaser because I'm scared of being alone. Yeah, and that's like, that's fun and interesting. And at first I was like, oh, maybe we'll get somewhere with Allie. You know,
some more substance.
We'll find out if there's like more to it. But there really isn't, and I think one of the moments where I got really, like, oof with Allie was when she was like, I'm not like the other girls. I am short, and I have brown hair, and I have big tits. I have a double D. And I was just like, listen, double D breasts are not small, but they're also not...
like huge
super big. And... like, this is, like, the typical thing that I would expect from a male writer, but not a female writer. Yeah. Because I would assume a female writer is aware of how bra sizes work and aware that bra sizes go up to, like, M or something. Yeah. So, and the size of the cup changes with, like, the circumference of your rib cage.
The band size, yeah.
So, a D can be... much bigger on like a heavier person than on a small person, but they're always proportionate to the body size, and D is not particularly big. Like, when it starts looking disproportionate is like H cup, J cup, like that's where you're like, oh, those are really, really big breasts. And her being like, oh, I have huge tits, and people keep staring, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of men look at breasts. Yeah. But please do not build your personality around this, especially if your breasts aren't actually like that big. Every company has double D cup versions of all their standard models. Yeah. I promise you, it's easy to find them in stores. You're not suffering like Jesus on the cross for your double Ds. I'm sorry.
It's just it feels like I felt like with Allie's story, a lot of Allie's inner monologue and like how she acts towards the other people was written from a male perspective. Yeah, like what if a man tried to write a feminist last girl in a horror movie?
Yeah, ironically enough, like Allie's section, even though Allie has like a constant running, I'm such a feminist inside voice, does feel the most misogynist out of all the three stories, which is kind of crazy.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of slasher movie, especially like the I mean, there's more modern ones that like really honor the last girl standing trope with in like a non-disgusting way. But the majority of slasher movies is so ridiculously misogynistic that it's on brand, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
But again,
we're gonna save the judgment. We're explaining the plot
I'm sorry.
So they're in that car. Allie wakes up. They have arrived at the cabin in the woods.
The cabin in the woods.
Which Allie's really pissed about because she and her friends agreed to going to a cabin by the sea.
Yeah.
And also, the boyfriends were not supposed to be involved. This was a trip. This was a birthday trip for Allie.
That's the worst thing. Like,
that was the point where I was like, oh, these friends are terrible.
Like, insult to injury. It's Allie's birthday tomorrow.
At that point, I was just like, oh, these are not your friends, girl. Yeah. They just keep you around. These are not, they do not care about you.
And the thing is, all the girls were asleep upon waking up.
Because they were given some sort of mixed drink in like a non-see-through bottle by Steve.
Yeah, well, that's what Allie kind of picks up together later. There, they think, oh, the drive was just long, and the sun was so nice, and it was just cozy.
Yeah, they're now at this cabin. Allie's pissed.
Yeah.
She's not happy. Brad's like, oh, but this is so fun. I organized this.
It's Allie's his cabin.
Pissed. And, everyone sides with Brad. Yeah. And Allie's just like...
It's 4 against 1.
Well, it's not like I can walk back. Yeah. I need the car to leave, so I'll just try to make the best of it. And, I see how Brad looks at me, and the moment he tries anything, I'm getting violent. Which, very valid, totally respectable, whatever. And so...
They settle up in the cabin.
They stay in this cabin. They have some fun. There's, a waterfall around there. They
go on a hike.
Yeah, they're doing a fun thing for, the day. And then it gets night, and they're sitting around a campfire.
Yeah.
And Brad's like, we should play a game. And Allie is so genre-savvy. She's like... I'm not playing stupid games with you, girl. She was like, oh, let's play Uno, because she meant to play Uno with her friends.
Yeah, she
that's
has
the
it
thing
with
they
her.
do. That's a fun thing, and they all enjoy it.
Yeah.
And Brad's like, no, that's a baby game. Let's play something else, which I forgot the name of.
I don't.
It's basically a reverse hide and seek situation.
Yeah. No, it's not coming up to me.
It was Ghouls and Gravekeepers or something. It was.
I can look.
Yeah, you can look it up.
I can find it.
But and she makes fun of him for this appropriately, because it is a kid's game too. And she's like, I'm not playing this with you. First off, it's silly. Second off, we're in the woods. It's night. You can't see. Any of us could break their leg if we're not careful.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. I'm not participating. And she just goes to bed. And everyone else is she first expects
ghosts in the graveyard.
That they're gonna make fun of her, but there's a uncomfortable silence after she's left, which is wow. I mean, I'm sure these women really have a great relationship with their boyfriends. But yeah, Allie goes to bed, and then at night, the slasher nonsense starts. Yeah. There's a noise outside the window.
Thing is, so an additional thing is, so what you expect to happen if you played the ghost in the graveyard is that Allie would be the one who's the ghost who goes to hide.
Yeah.
And then, slasher things would ensue. But because she goes to sleep, there has to be a different solution. Yeah. And she has to sleep. So Cam and Brad have their own room, and she sleeps together in the same room as Madison and Steve in the bunk bed that's usually for the child. And then in the night, there's
noises outside. Weird noises. Really suspicious.
They see a person, a shadow, something.
Yeah, they see something, and Steve at first wants to look, but Allie's genre savvy, and she's like, don't stick your head out.
I was like, please don't stick your head out.
Yeah, so they're like, okay, yeah, let's, and she's like, it's probably just Brad, having a laugh. So they go over, check if Brad and Cam are sleeping. They're in their room sleeping, they hear more of the noises. Yeah. Very suspicious. Then, super loud noise, someone, fucked up the car.
Yeah.
They look at it, and they're, really mad about it. They run out, are mad, whatever. And then it keeps going, like, Cam
gets knocked over.
Really, like, I want to go to sleep. I don't care about this. She gets attacked, is, like, asleep. At first, they're like, oh, did she hit her head? Like, did somebody, give her a concussion? But then they find that she's been injected with something. They're, like, concerned about her. So they, like... collect in the main room of the cabin. Yeah. They notice none of the doors or the windows have locks, which is crazy.
And Brad is so weird about it. you expect him to kind of not care about his girlfriend, but he's
extremely dismissive of it. Yeah. He does not seem to care.
He's dismissive of everything. Of her being unconscious, of the windows not having locks.
So while they check on all the windows and stuff, he stays with Cam in their room. Yeah. And then they go to check on them, and Brad's gone, Cam's still there. Yeah. And we never see Brad again.
Right, we don't.
Brad's just gone. So, they keep staying there. At some point, it gets light outside. For a second, like, they leave Cam alone. She gets her throat slit. Yeah. The slasher's there. Like, at some point, like, Steve also gets killed. Madison runs off.
Madison runs off beforehand.
Yeah, Madison runs off. Steve faints, actually. Which is charming. Allie stays with Steve to wake him back up, because she's like... Madison's so far gone, I don't even know which way she ran. Yeah. So I'm just gonna wake him up, and then we're gonna look. And then after he wakes up, the slasher comes back and kills Steve.
And comes actually into the house.
And Allie runs off, just sprints down the long driveway up to the cabin. At some point, just Madison shows up out of the woods, and they, like, crash together, and they have, like, this extremely forced reconciliation where they're both like, oh, maybe we weren't, like, the best of friends. Yeah, maybe I was too conceited. Oh, maybe we didn't, like, respect you enough. We should do better in the future. And then Madison gets killed. Yeah. And Allie runs off and also finds an exit door.
Like, she squabbles with the slasher, because he was, like, right behind her, and, like, she was on the ground, and she manages to get away. Yeah. I think by kicking him in the balls.
Yeah, she kicks him in the balls, and then, like,
she does a lot of ball kicking. She also kicks Brad in the balls,
which is a very good strategy. I mean, it works really well. And she's very short and she can't really.
And she's like the smarty pants, right? Yeah. Very early on, she notices the light is weird.
Yeah, she's like, something is wrong. Yeah, there is, at the beginning, it feels more promising than it ends up being, because it's like the light feels off. There are no insects at all.
No animals at all.
You hear no wood noises at all, like you usually would. There's, like, leaves sprinkled on the ground because it's, like, fall. Mm-hmm. And then eventually she's like, but all these trees are evergreen. This is not their leaves. Here, It's all wrong. Like, the cabin feels like such a setup because it's so tropey. Yeah. And she's like, something is wrong. And I think Brad is responsible. Yeah. Steve defends him. Madison is like, because she doesn't want to argue with Steve, and she doesn't,
But in the end, Steve kind of comes around, which is even sadder than that he gets killed.
He comes around, like, a little bit. He's like, well, maybe he could have something to do. Yeah. Steve's really hung up about the fact that the car got totaled, where I'm like...
Because it was his car, I think, wasn't it?
No, it was Brad's car, and he's like, he would never destroy that car. And Allie's just like, his dad just will buy him a new car. Yeah. He's not that attached to that car, man.
Yeah, and this time, well, she runs away from the slasher, and there's also, again, an exit door, and she runs through it. And this time, throughout the chat log, the people in the forum talk about how she's like, oh no, I think a slasher is, like, my favorite genre.
Yeah, and she's like, a slasher is totally survivable if you're in a group, because, like, he can't kill all of you at once. You could overwhelm him. Yeah. And
they're always being stupid. Yeah,
7412 is there again, and he's like, oh really? I think a slasher could totally do it. Yeah. And there's again the whole, like, oh, you should, you have, like, if you think you could do it, like, then prove it, right? Yeah. And he calls her a bitch too. Like,
he goes around calling people bitches all the time.
BYZ 7412 is very emotionally volatile, very, very fragile, little piss baby.
Yeah, like, there's weird context, like, she says, every villain might be the hero of his own story, but that doesn't mean he's not completely wrong. And 7412 goes, how do you know? And she's like, well, come on, you don't think killing random people is wrong? He's like, what if the killing isn't random at all?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, that's the kind of stuff this weird dude writes.
When that was said, I was at first like, oh, does this person have, like, beef with Brad?
Yeah.
Because I was like, Brad totally deserves to get murdered. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Brad's vibes are rancid. Again, I'm like, I'm pretty sure he has raped women before. I am not kidding. Like, his energy is that. So I'm like, I could only see someone having beef with him. But that's not at all the implication at the end.
Yeah. And she, like, somebody says the characters would probably survive more often if they weren't so stupid. And she's like, oh, yeah, like, they're so fucking stupid. And he's like, all right, then prove it.
Yeah.
So, again, the prove it thing happening right in the beginning of the last chapter.
Yeah. And so that's Allie's part. It's really just like a slasher story that has a protagonist who's genre aware, but that doesn't actually change anything at all.
Yeah, because you're still panicky and overwhelmed.
No, but also because the people still get picked off one by one, and the survivor is like the nerdy virgin and not like the girl who has like a boyfriend and is more promiscuous and goes to parties. Like, she's the I stay at home, I don't go to parties girl.
Yeah.
So like, it's still it does not at all break with genre conventions. The only thing is that Allie's like self-aware of the genre she's in, but it changes nothing at all.
And then we get to the last one, which the chat this time starts with, oh no, I think I really like the dystopian ones.
And that's also a weird bit, because I feel like dystopias, especially the YA dystopias, didn't actually have as consistent a body of tropes as these other genres do. And, like, in fairness, both cozy mysteries and slasher horrors are way more established. Like, they've been around for a long time. But it is weird because, like, dystopian YA, like dystopian death games, a la Hunger Games or whatever.
Yeah.
There weren't actually that many. And they weren't that consistent with each other either. Like, Divergent doesn't even have, like, a death game. Divergent just has, like, bad Hogwarts houses.
Yeah.
And I think Maze Runner also, it's not, like, a death game either.
It's not a game in the sense, like, the boys are just, well, we also find out the girls, but they're just being put in, like, the middle of the maze, and then every night the maze opens. And then, you know, creatures have the potential of coming in. And they regularly send out runners while the maze opens. To find the end of the maze.
And but it's like entirely different from like Hunger Games. Like, it's not, the setup is like totally different. Which makes, I think, the third section is already the weakest in my opinion, but it like gets even weaker by the fact that it doesn't actually there isn't actually like a consistent set of tropes to work off of for like
The hook is that they say, I love those YA books with dystopic future and dangerous killing games and their painfully obvious love triangles. And then they talk about the love triangles and...
Yeah, which is like the love triangles have no effect at all on like the...
And then our main character, who this time I feel like it's the most obvious that it's her account. Yeah. Because her name is in there. Says, oh, to be fair, you know, Katniss was distracted by her hot teammates. That wouldn't happen to me. Yeah. I'm too old to be distracted by the bullshit of men. And she says, I think I'd be okay in a Hunger Games style scenario. And somebody's like, oh shit, are you in the military or something? She's like, no.
I'm just a mom.
I'm not killing anyone, not on purpose anyway. And then our guy comes back, our 7412, and he's like, if those are the rules of the game, you don't have a choice. And she doesn't have a choice because the scenario starts. We again have a waking up situation, and she wakes up in like
she's like in
a room.
She's in a container. She's like,
oh no, first the container. Yeah, right.
She's like, I think their hands are bound, I think.
Hands are bound, they have like these overalls on with numbers.
And there's like guys pointing guns at them. Yeah. And it's like, ooh, that's not good. And then it turns out, they've been kidnapped to participate in like a
death game.
A dystopian death game. And they're like, she remembers, oh yeah, they showed me like a video of my daughter being abducted. Yeah. And they were like, we'll kill her or hurt her if you don't participate. So she's like, well, I guess I gotta.
And the only way to like save them is to like win.
Yeah. To get out of it's not even, they don't even say that only one person can win. They're just like, hey, you just have to make it to the end of the maze, where it's just like, okay, my dude, so you did build a game where people don't have to kill each other at all if they want to get to the end.
At the same time, they like, it's all women.
Yeah.
It's all women are the contestants. They get let out and immediately they have like, because I think before they're not allowed to talk, but after they get out the container, there's like this, okay, wait, let's try to make this like logical, right? And they try to talk to each other and immediately there's like, some people are just running. They're like, I'm not even gonna wait.
Like, I'm not here to make friends, I am leaving immediately. Yeah. Maggie talks. That's our protagonist for this section. I forgot to say. Finds another single mom to talk to, and like they
pair off.
Yeah, they pair off kind of, and then there's challenges in the maze. At first, it's like there's like a thing where they can get bags with food or water, and some people like don't get any. And Maggie's like, oh, we should split it with them because that's like the right thing to do. And there are people who are like, no, I'm in it for me and no one else.
Yeah, and that's when kind of like, the group splits.
Yeah, there's like a cartoonishly like cruel woman in there where you're like, listen, it's not that I don't believe that people like this could exist. They absolutely can. The problem is that the book keeps telling you how cartoonishly and unrealistically she behaves.
Yeah, yeah.
And they keep being like, wow, I didn't know women like this could even exist. And it's like, dude, don't draw so much attention to it.
To that fact, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're like the group of misfits, right? Like the it is like in the Hunger Games, like the fit, young, able-bodied people kind of flock together around the cartoonishly asshole-ish woman and they go off. And then the rest of the group, so Maggie, the other mom, and like some other people, like an older woman and like a younger woman, but she's kind of frail. She has asthma.
She says she has asthma and
like she can't run that fast and stuff. They like flock together. And Maggie is a good person at heart.
She's trying to keep people safe. Yeah. She's trying to help other people because she's like, yeah, they have my daughter, but also I don't think I could live with myself
if I
left these people behind because I don't want to be that kind of person.
Yeah.
So they go through the different trials. There's like a jungle full of mines, like landmines.
Yeah.
There's
and like I would say horrific stuff happens there. Like she goes through it. There's like a person that like leg gets blown off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One person immediately gets blown to bits.
People are like violently killed.
Yeah.
That's fair. Like, yes, that does happen, but it's also just like the problem is that the book is like imagine if that happened for real, and I'm just like, this is too unrealistic to happen for real.
Well, they're running away.
Because it's like a giant maze, but it's all inside.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to believe that people really grew out all these jungle plants, and like they're real plants, and they've been brought in there.
And then they like get really slow because they don't want to step on the mines, and they hear other people stepping on the mines, and then in typical dystopian game fashion, because they're being too slow, there's now a wave of spiders,
which is also just so silly.
And they just start running, and then I think the next room was the obstacle course.
Yeah, I think there's like an obstacle course with like cartoonish shit, like swinging blades that can impale
I love the rope one because it was so silly.
Yeah, there's like a climbing rope with like a bell at the top, which you're in a standard course supposed to ring if you made it and then go back down. And, like, one person climbs it and rings it because she does obstacle courses all the time. And the rope
that was the cartoonishly evil one.
And, like... No, that was the marathon runner from Maggie's team.
Oh.
the cartoonishly evil one dies in her like fight to the death in the boxing ring.
I forgot.
So there's like an obstacle course filled with like cartoonishly ridiculous stuff, but also stuff where you're just like, you're just wading through a pool of like dirty, mucky water. It is what it is. Like,
it happens.
There's not that much. It's just kind of like weird. It's not really scary because it's just cartoonish.
Yeah.
It's not.
You expect at least one person of the group to die each room.
Yeah, and it.
And you know it cannot be Maggie.
Yeah, you know it won't be Maggie. Because she needs to get to the end to find her door, because you have pattern recognition, you know how stories go.
So in the end, they enter this room, and it's just Maggie, the other mom, Sanya, I think was her name, and the woman with asthma.
Yeah, Beth, who's like frail, and she has like big doe eyes. She's so cute.
She's like so the small protective one.
She's playing baby, you know. Yeah. She's like, oh, take care of me, whatever.
And inside of that room, there's like a boxing ring.
And in the boxing ring is like the...
Number 2 and number 10.
Yeah, number 2 and number 10. The women who are like, we're not sharing. We're in it for ourselves and no one else. And they're like, they've been going at it for a while. They both look terrible. They've been beating the shit out of each other. And right behind the ring is just the white exit door.
Yeah.
And Maggie's like, we can just go to the exit, right?
And like, Beth is like, no, we have to go through.
And Maggie's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, and Sanya's like,
they
no,
just
we
say
gotta
we
walk
have to
around.
Get through the obstacles. We could just climb over the ring and leave. It doesn't say we have to fight.
Yeah.
And she's like, actually, now that I think about it, Beth has been sus the entire time.
Yeah.
Because she got real fast when those spiders came. Yeah. She was real fast in this obstacle course.
Actually, I don't think it was Maggie. I think it's Sanya pointing all of this out.
No, it's Maggie. Sanya's then like, wait, what? Yeah. That's crazy. Are you like paranoid? And Maggie's like, no, I'm right.
Uh-huh.
And then Beth is like dropping her ruse, and it turns out she's just a sadistic piece of shit who loves killing people and suffering.
So Maggie's basically like, come on, what's your deal? Yeah. Let's be honest here. Let's fuck shit up. You want to fight with me? And Beth is like, yeah. You know what?
Yeah.
Yes, I do want to fight you.
I'm gonna beat you up and I'm gonna kill you. And
well, Beth doesn't really. The other two, they've beaten each other to death.
Yeah.
They're not of relevance anymore. And then Beth doesn't think that Maggie and Sanya are just gonna 2-time her, which they do.
Which they end up doing.
Like, they're like, of course we're both gonna beat you.
Yeah, at first, like, Maggie attacks her and, like, Beth would easily win this. Yeah. She's, like, trained.
Yeah. She was a mole, basically, in the whole thing.
And then Sanya has it, and they just beat her unconscious and, like, leave through the exit door.
Yeah. And then we get to the final chapter.
Yeah.
The all together. So, first one, Celia goes through the door. She's like, what is happening? It's like a hallway with 2 other doors. And she locks the door behind her just in time.
For somebody else to stumble through the next door. Allie.
Just in time before the other people can arrive.
Yeah, that too.
On the other side of the door. And then she turns around and...
Allie stumbles through her door, and then shortly after, Maggie comes in. Maggie and Sanya come in through their door.
And that's why I relate so much with Celia. She's like, oh, I'm so dumb. Because Ellie comes through the door and immediately sees that you can lock it. Right? Celia was at first like
for a
looking...
while. Yeah, we're looking around, and then she was like, oh, there's a lock on the door.
And Ellie comes through, immediately locks it.
And
and the slasher on the other side tries to like just slash through the door.
Yeah, he's like, come back, you bitch, let me kill you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of embarrassing for him, honestly.
Yeah, and then Sanya and Maggie just, like
normally come
through the door and like, oh, hello.
And at first Celia's like, is this another mind game?
Yeah.
But then they all talk, and it turns out they're all like, okay, this is like, we all have had the worst day.
Because in the way, like, Sanya and Maggie are very aware if they are in an artificial environment. Allie has suspected this for like, the
Allie
longest
figured
time.
it out for herself, and, like, Celia also eventually got there.
Yeah.
So they're all like, okay, well, let's see where this hallway goes.
And they just walk the hallway.
Yeah, so they get to a room full of monitors, so they can see, there's been, like, cameras everywhere the entire time. We've been, like, surveilled the entire time.
They see the men chasing them.
Yeah, they see there's still some guys at, like, the door where Celia came through.
Yeah.
That they're trying to, like,
barge
through with like a fucking tree trunk.
A battering ram
improvised battering ram. It's really funny.
Men.
Yeah. But then they're like, why is no one here? That's weird.
It's empty. And then they just, investigate further, and they come to like they look, and there's like adjacent door to a bathroom.
Yeah, and the guy comes in.
And the guy comes out of that door with like I think, does he even have a cup in his hand or something?
He's
like, he's just a gangly dude, like big glasses,
extremely nerdy looking.
Yeah,
and he's just like, what the fuck are you guys doing here?
And immediately you hate this guy, because he's like, what the fuck are you doing there? And they're like, well, they're getting sassy, they've been through it, so I don't know who it is, but they're like, well, there's a big door with an exit sign, so we go through. And he goes, I don't mean that. Statistically, women are not as fast as men, so how did you get here? And it's like,
He's listened to too much Jordan Peterson.
Oh my god.
He's been too much on Reddit or even 4chan.
It's like incel
You're
dumb.
Like, he's that kind of dude. Yeah. And then he keeps talking, being a little shit. They beat him up, putting it.
They quickly figure out that this guy. Oh wait, I looked up Matheson. What was it? Matheson. I had to look up on YouTube how to pronounce his name. They quickly figure out Matheson is a CEO.
He's a tech billionaire. He invented some garbage in Silicon Valley, and someone bought his company. And
he had recently bought an island off the coast and was building a huge complex there, and there was media attention on it because he was
no one knows what's in there.
So secretive about
suspicious.
it. And basically, he had gotten them all abducted and kidnapped because of their bullshittery, in his opinion,
on forums, and also because they had people around them who would pay him.
Yeah, and each of them had somebody who would,
Yeah.
We find out that they never had Maggie's child. That was just deep fake videos.
Yeah, deep fake videos.
And they got the photos of her child from social media or something.
Yeah.
It was, and so there's no consequences for them in that case. To just beat him
the
up.
Shit out of this guy, which they do, which is the right choice.
They deduct very logically that there must be a way off the island. He is dumb enough to give them answers to their questions. Yeah. And at the end, they're
in a small motorboat on their way to the coast, and he's just like, police aren't gonna believe you, right? You look like crazy women, and you abducted me, a billionaire CEO. If you think you're gonna get away with this, you're crazy. They look at each other. Maggie looks at him.
Is it Maggie?
Is it Maggie? I
thought it was Celia.
Was it Celia?
Let me check again. They have a recording of him as well where he confesses it. He's like, they still will not believe me.
But it's also recordings are not admissible in court because they're not that hard to fake.
Yeah.
So
and the others are like, well, whatever. And then Celia goes through emotions in her head.
What happened? Oh, yeah, they would not believe us. Well,
and then
do you know how we can solve this issue? And then they throw him overboard.
Yeah, she pushes him. Yeah. While the others are looking away because they're contemplating, what can we do? Celia's just like, you know what? I'm done with this issue.
Yeah, she's like, you know what?
She pushes him off. The others are like, the fuck did you do? And she says, all right then, prove it. Because he was like, they're never gonna believe you.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the book.
That's the end of the book. That's,
I had many thoughts when I had finished that.
Yeah, I also had a lot of thoughts.
Because I was so roped in with Celia and the beginning of her story that I read the whole book in one go.
Yeah.
And I was very disappointed by the way that everything wrapped up in the end. And the thing is, before you say anything, right? Because I read this book last year during December.
For you, it's been a while.
For the first time. And I constantly thought, because you guys know me, I don't have the most intelligent takes.
Yeah.
So I was like, I think something is whooshing over my head.
You're like, I'm missing something.
I'm missing something.
Right?
Because I felt like...
Because the book's not subtle about the themes.
It's spelling out everything.
It's so obvious that you're like, okay, is there like a hidden message there?
Yeah.
But no.
I was hoping for, if you read it, that you, like, have some more insights for me. But you also know that.
No, and the thing is, the back of the book has like a discussion guide.
Yeah.
And
discussion questions. Should I just read them?
I mean, if you want to.
Like, the questions don't give you the clue that there's much more going on. Like, the first question is, who was your favorite character in the novel and why? How do the three women differ in their reactions to finding themselves in their scenarios? Celia's biggest fear is that she would speak words that no one would believe. How does Matheson take advantage of the fact that women are not often believed? Last one is, if you had to cast this book as a film, who would you envision playing Allie, Celia, and Maggie? Like, these are not...
Yeah, but also the questions are like, oh, how does this take advantage of how women are often not believed?
Yeah,
and
while they are dramatized for fictional purposes here, do any of the women's experience online match up with your experience of cyberbullying and toxic internet culture?
So really, what these questions show you is that the book is exactly about what you think it is about.
Yeah.
It's just incredibly ham-fisted about it. And like, listen, okay, I'm a feminist. Feminism is good. Right? We can all agree. Yes, a lot of women are treated very badly by men and systems set up to benefit men by, set up by other men like a long time ago. And a lot of these have just a kind of inertia that you'd have to actively disrupt in order to, change the status quo. All of that is true. But listen, man, I don't need to be told this 50 times.
Not in the way, yeah.
I understand metaphor. I understand implication. I'm not fucking stupid.
Yeah.
This book is trying very hard to get across a feminist message, which to some degree I can applaud. Like, okay, it's good when things are feminist. Again, as I said, I agree.
You are.
These things are true.
Yeah.
But the way they're gotten across here is just unpleasant to read.
It feels
it's not interesting.
I felt like a child. I felt like a toddler in the way that it was hand-fed to me.
The fact is that, like, I understand what the author is going for. It is not random that with every story, it gets more obvious that the system is set up by a man to disadvantage women.
Yeah.
It is artificial, created to hurt those women. Like, I understand these are games with, like, underlying rules that the characters have to figure out or, like, are told. Like, I understand all that. I understood this after reading the Celia section. It did not need to be more overt. I am not fucking stupid.
And I felt like So, Celia's scenario is also my favorite because I felt like the most organic fear women have because danger is at home.
Yeah.
There's this feeling of a person I love and that I am supposed to know. I don't know them anymore suddenly. Felt like a very organic danger. And that got more and more, as you said, more and more artificial, but that also made the danger feel more and more unreal and not...
At some point it gets silly.
Yeah, it gets silly and it feels like it's like a caricature of feminism in a way.
You're like, okay, at what point am I supposed to be scared when there's men in balaclavas threatening women with cattle prods to go through a death maze?
I have to add here, every single time I think about men in balaclavas, I have to think of Night Vale. Because of the police dude with the balaclava. It's people who know will know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But, like, am I supposed to take this seriously?
Yeah.
I cannot. But also, the thing is that ultimately the way it is written, in the first scenario, not really, but in the two following, is that the female characters beside the main character are hardly characters at all.
Yeah.
In fact, the way especially Cam and Madison are written drips with a kind of misogyny that I would not expect in a feminist book.
Mm-hmm.
It drips with this, oh, not like other girls. Oh, those party girls who just want, hot men to fuck them, who don't care about other women and would gladly, put them aside. Who, they're so empty and vacuous and silly. It's like, oh, Cam would never want to walk very far. She would rather wait here with a slasher for us to come back with a different car for her. Or Madison, who, yes, is hysterical and that's a fair reaction, but even before that just looks to Steve to find out what her decisions would be. They don't feel like characters, and to a degree, neither, Steve also doesn't. Brad is a believable character who I'm oh, I know, I have seen this kind of guy. I believe this guy's, I know this. This is a real person, and this is how these people behave. But Steve?
To be fair, with Steve I have to disagree. I've met a couple of Steves. Because a lot of time men just aren't this weird caricature of a Brad.
No, but the thing about Steve is that, depending on what the plot demands, he gets really stupid and is just wants to fight the slasher at random, and Allie has to be oh no, his poor testosterone-driven brain. He just wants to go caveman style and fight people. And I'm that's not, I don't think that's how a man would behave. I'm sorry, but I expect more from them, and I don't think this is even a meathead. I think once they're okay, yeah, this guy's out there with a weapon, I don't have a weapon, we're all alone here, they could kill me. I don't think a man would behave like this. Steve doesn't feel real because he just ping-pongs between listening to Allie and seeming reasonable and then randomly being no, I need to jump out into the woods and fight this man with in fisticuffs, he's not. But I don't believe that that's what men are like. I just don't. I'm sorry.
I thought it from the perspective of the way that he kind of changes in relation to Brad.
No,
because I feel that's
fine.
But
no, that's not what I meant.
The thing is, it would make sense in the book, I feel, if Madison and Cam weren't real people. If they were Beths. You know what I mean? If they were actresses
at first,
in the thing...
Yeah, but then I was oh, they've known each other for so long, so...
Then it would make sense. Because then it would be oh, Allie, you are being... presented with this stupid group of slasher people, and you, the only smart person.
But that's not the
case. But that's not what's happening. So that's kind of
I think,
weird.
Listen, I'm sure there are women who love to party and who are truly, genuinely horrible friends to their friends.
Oh, absolutely.
But just the setup of, hey, for a while now, we've planned a birthday trip with this person who I know doesn't like my boyfriend or the other boyfriend, and we've promised to do this just us three.
Yeah.
We've already rented we've already picked the cabin at the ocean. We already have plans.
And they are excited for it. It's not
We're all excited for it. And then the day off, your boyfriend comes in and is hey, I have a cool other idea we should totally do. I can imagine being oh, we'll take our boyfriends along because they are fun. This could be a fun thing for everyone.
You don't go somewhere completely
and you
else.
See, Allie's reaction, and you kind of feel bad about it because you're maybe this was a bad idea, but now I don't want to disinvite them because that's even more awkward. And that feels natural to me. What doesn't feel natural to me is then to change your entire plans and go somewhere none of you know where it is.
And just accepting that.
Yeah, and just accepting that and just going along with it. I'm I don't think women are like that. I don't think even women in relationships with controlling men are like this, and I don't think they would just agree to that. Even if Cam is oh, I trust Brad, and I'm sure he's right. Am I supposed to believe that Madison is just going with this for no good reason? Because just if these people cared at all about Allie in any respect, why would you do this to your friend?
Yeah.
It's so cruel. And then they pretend like, oh, it's totally not a big deal, right, Ellie? We're gonna have a good time. And it's like, I don't think people with this little self-awareness exist. Like, they're behaving too ridiculously.
Yeah.
To be real.
They're just very cartoonish, and it's a lot of the book is cartoonish. We've said this word a couple of times, but it's true. And it doesn't help that Allie is just as, like, her inner monologue. Like, I don't want to make it sound bad, but it is bad. She was, to me, the most annoying of the three women because she was having this constant I'm better than them dialogue, and it was kind of perpetuating this I'm not like other girls so hard that at some point I was like, you know what, Ellie, I do want you to die through the slasher. I want Madison to survive. She's like the Britney from Glee, you know? I want her to just bumble through this with a little bit less brain than you have, but you know, like, I'm more sympathetic towards that person than towards you at this point. So I was just done with Allie, to be honest. She was so like unnecessarily mean.
It doesn't help that she kept saying the same things over and over. Like, none of the things she said were like wrong. They were like, you know, yes, men in power do get away with stuff. Rich white men get away with even more. You were so right, Allie, but we already know this about Brad. We already know this without you saying it verbatim several times.
Yeah.
The implications are already clear. Like, the way Brad was introduced was extremely effective because we all already knew the implications
and there was this,
of the kind of man he is. You don't need to keep saying it.
There's this icky moment while they're still in the car when I don't know if he actually turns around or does he look in the rear mirror.
I think in the rear view mirror.
And like their eyes meet and you're immediately like, oh my god, don't be alone with this man.
Yeah. No, and it really is just like, we understand what kind of man he is and why he's like this so quickly. But then she keeps reiterating that, like, he's like this because he's from a rich family and he could always do whatever he wanted. And it's like, yes, I know.
And then after the slasher thing starts, she's like constantly like, oh, I underestimated Steve. And, oh, you know, I didn't think Madison would keep together so well until now. And, oh, Steve is really surprising me. It's like, I get it, Allison. I get it. You're surprised.
Yeah.
Like, give me another original thought, please.
I think the problem also is that in the slasher sections, just not that much happens. And I think a slasher is perhaps one of the most unsuited horror setups to do with a self- and genre-aware protagonist.
Yeah.
Because, right, she's, you know, she knows what slashers are like, and she keeps saying that. And there's not really, like, the tension isn't really there if your protagonist already knows it. It's also that slashers are just not that interesting in real life.
It's just a horrific thing.
It's a very tall, very strong man with a huge knife. It's very dangerous. But it's not interesting. It's not an interesting kind of danger. Like,
or not more like not suspenseful.
I'm not engaged. The way more interesting part was her figuring out that she was not in a real piece of wood somewhere.
I think the most parts where I was like, ooh, tension was when she was taking short breaks and being like, wait, should I do XYZ?
Yeah, those were good moments.
The slasher or whomever is orchestrating this could be like thinking ahead. Yeah. Like playing chess, how much is happening. She's standing in front of a door and she wants to open it. She's like, wait, should I not? Maybe
what if the slasher's behind her waiting.
Yeah. Know, those were the moments
those were like, interesting parts, but then a lot of it just
isn't. A lot of it is, yeah. And I mean, I feel like also writing a slasher is not as effective.
I think you have to do something else with it than just doing the tropiest version of it. Because the thing is also that with all the scenarios, it's pretty obvious from how they're set up that Matheson doesn't understand media, and thereby the scenarios all don't really fit into the mold they're supposed to fit in. Like, at first we have Mrs. Kerrigan's death, which is way too violent and gruesome for a cozy mystery.
She says she likes the bloodless corpse.
Yeah.
Like, she writes that as a chat.
Yeah, and it's like, it doesn't fit at all with a cozy mystery. And the fact that she's in a dumpster is even worse. This is not cozy mystery material at all. And that's, that's something that Celia even noted, where she's like, this doesn't fit at all with...
like, cozy mystery would be someone at her restaurant gets poisoned and dies in the hospital.
Cozy mystery would be that Mrs. Kerrigan is found dead the next morning.
Or something like that,
and no one knows what happened after, there was an altercation at the restaurant. But that's not what happened at all.
Yeah.
And in the second one, it's also like, the slasher isn't, like, it fits into the obvious, like, oh, there's a cabin in the woods, and then the slasher appears. But there are very few people for a slasher. And
not necessarily, but okay.
But, like, if Brad's your inside man, who's gonna disappear the moment it starts, Cam's gonna be unconscious the entire time.
Yeah, but you have 5 people in itself is an appropriate slasher.
Yeah, I guess. But it's also...
yeah, I guess.
But it's also not interesting the way it's in the book. Right?
Yeah, no,
like,
I'm not arguing that one.
Yeah, no, not at all. But it's like, it's also just that, yeah, sure, you arrive there with your car, but the cabin's already super suspicious when you arrive.
Yeah.
Which should not be the case at all. It should be a real, normal cabin you're supposed to be at.
It would have helped so much if there'd been, like, I mean, yes, the cabin belongs to Brad, but, like, Brad's uncle giving them the keys or something.
Yeah, something. Well, then the door would have needed a lock.
Yeah, but the key could be lost, for example.
Like, the cabin is immediately suspicious because it doesn't at all fit into Brad's life circumstances.
Yeah.
It's unluxurious. There is nothing really there. Parts of it are
very
unfinished.
Bare. Like, it smells new as well.
Yeah, it smells super new. It's immediately suspicious.
Yeah.
And that's also wrong because part of the slasher fun is that everyone thinks they're safe and everything's fine. Yeah. And also the thing is that, like, the movie Cabin in the Woods exists already. It has existed for a good while now.
Yeah.
There is already a deconstruction of these tropes.
Yeah.
This is not at all interesting.
And the thing is with... because you started with saying, oh, it's very obvious Matheson doesn't know. It's like, what can you blame on, oh, obviously Matheson wouldn't, properly execute this? And what can you blame on, no, Christina Henry just really didn't think this through.
Yeah, but also that, like, the slasher is just a guy.
It's just an actor they hired.
Yeah, and...
who actually kills people.
Yeah, he actually kills people, which he wasn't supposed to be doing. Like, he wasn't supposed to kill Steve at all.
And Madison, yeah.
I mean, Madison... Yeah, that's true, but also at that point it was like...
At that point he already...
No, I think Madison was supposed to die too. I think Madison and Allie were supposed to die because Brad thought they were both bad influences on Cam.
Yeah, they both were bad influences, but did the actor know that he was supposed to, like, actually... Like, Steve was an accident... But
I think both Madison and Allie were supposed to die. But
we do know, maybe as a side note, that both Mrs. Corrigan and Cam didn't actually die.
And we also never get closure on what the fuck happened afterwards.
No. Which we don't find, which is fine, you know.
I mean, for Miss Corrigan, you don't need it because, like, yeah, she was a hired actress, but she's just going on with her.
But
life.
for Brad and Cam, like, Brad was the one who paid the money.
Yeah.
So he was like. We don't know what happens to Cam.
Yeah, the thing is, like, so far Brad has gotten exactly what he wanted. Like, Steve's dead, but he can replace Steve.
Yeah. And okay, Allie is still alive.
But Cam will just think, they had, like, there was something weird in the woods and someone attacked their car, but, like... whatever else. Whatever. Yeah, and then in the last one, the games are not at all interesting, or they're not a competition at all. It's like again, in the Hunger Games, it's specifically set up for people to kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
But in this game, it's not at all set up that you have to. It says, oh yeah, whoever reaches the finish line can leave.
And the thing is, Maggie says it's very obviously made to, like, be a challenge for women. Like, all of these are challenges that target fears, like arachnophobia, or, you know, like, just bodily, like, challenges that obviously, or on average, women would not be able to do well. So it doesn't even feel like, there's not even except for this, oh, you just have to arrive at the end.
Yeah.
There's not even any finesse about the challenges.
It's also, the thing is also that, like, dystopian death games work because they're set in a dystopia where it's normalized that the death games happen. Like, that's important.
Yeah.
You can't really do this by just, like, taking someone hostage, because then you're just a crazy guy.
And, like,
it's not, like, you're not actually acting out the story.
And if you want to do, like, a Squid Game situation, then even then there's this... In Squid Game, the people go there on purpose.
Yeah, to win
They
something.
accept the invitation, they accept the money, the chance, without knowing what they're actually signing up for. And then they can't leave, you know? But it's...
Yeah. It's just... It just... isn't, it's not fun.
And the thing with the maze, it's not even a maze.
No, it's not.
Like,
because all the ways lead to the same challenges, because Matheson set them up and he didn't have more money for other shit.
Like, it's so weird that it's being introduced to you as, like, a mazy situation.
Because it really isn't.
When it's just one long hallway.
Yeah. with some
rooms.
Squigglies, yeah. It really is just... And it's so unwell thought out, because, like, yeah, sure, Beth can be like, hey, I think we're supposed to fight here, but people can just say no and go to the exit.
Yeah.
There's no guy with a gun around to prevent them from just going to the exit.
Like, with the exception of a couple of those challenges, like, especially the last one was so easy.
Yeah.
Because, like, what would have happened if all of them would have banded together and just walked through and tried to help as much as possible, and then I think, what was it,
10.
12 or
10? Just
10. If all of them had walked through the exit door, just, you know, like, and it's just, and there's also this thing of where Maggie goes through the very obvious thought of, why should we even assume that they would give us back our loved ones after we're done?
Yeah,
there
why
has
would
to
they
be a
stick
catch.
to the rules? Like, they don't have to. They can just kill us outright whenever they choose.
And obviously Matheson was so convinced that they wouldn't make it to the end that there wasn't even any security put in place.
Yeah.
Like, they can just walk through. Like, it wasn't even a person standing behind the exit door, like, knocking them over or something.
The crazy part about it is that, like, yes, I understand from the story's perspective, we are meant to understand that Matheson is an idiot who didn't think things through properly, and that there's a bunch of, like, problems which he never thought about, contingencies for, like, what if a person gets through the exit and locks it?
So
you have
convinced.
to travel around the whole island to get back to the compound or whatever. But as a reader, your suspension of disbelief just plummets, because you're like, this would take so much work to set up that there is no way people working on it didn't ever consider what could go wrong. Even if he didn't, other people must surely have brought up concerns or even just considered them at all. Never mind where he's like, oh yeah, everyone signed NDAs. You know that NDAs do not do shit if people just go to the press as an anonymous source, right?
Yeah.
That's why they do it. It's like, it's great that people can sign an NDA, but if I helped build a murder maze, I would probably, for, like, one of the richest guys in America who's really, like, up in the news and stuff, I would tell people, like, I'd be like, maybe he's just doing it for fun, but that's what he's doing.
The thing is also, like, an NDA does not, like, keep you from giving out information, saving other people's life. That's not how an NDA works.
If you're like, hey, I was contracted to design a murder maze, and I'm pretty sure he built it, you should probably check on that.
It's like, oh, yesterday I went to work and we drugged this woman, but yeah, no, I have an NDA. I can't tell the police. Of course you can.
Like that the people drugging and abducting the women, like the 20 people, are like crazy people who love working for him, who like hate women or whatever.
But like
those fair. But like the people who put the landmines in the jungle, you think those people weren't like, okay, but
maybe it's just all those 20 people.
But like all the people who built the rest, because you need know-how, like all the people who set up the fake town and shit, I would like, even if you don't especially if you don't suspect any foul play, I would be like, dude, it is fucking insane. Matheson set up this whole fake town with a fully functioning restaurant with fully built houses. They're not fully furnished, a lot of people don't live there, but like that's crazy, and he built that all inside, and I'm sure he like planned something there. Maybe he's doing like the most elaborate like filming, or he's doing like a fun game with like his rich friends. This would get out. Like people would talk about it. Like, I'm sorry, but like this information would immediately leak.
I was just like, you know, I know there's current controversy around Mr. Beast, but if Mr. Beast ever was to like buy an island and start to build, like he would be the perfect candidate to be like a Matheson kind of mastermind, because people will be like, oh, he's just building the next like 5 million Mr. Beast videos.
Yeah.
But yeah, like,
people would immediately go to the press because it's like, it's fascinating and it's weird, and people love news about what weird shit rich people get up to.
Like an NDA doesn't mean shit.
Like, even if you could sue that, you can't know which one of them did it unless the, like, you know, press gives you the information. But even at that point, the information's out.
Yeah.
People know you have this now.
And again, like, yeah, you should probably be scared of, like, him hiring some sort of hitman or something. But under the law, if the information that you give uncovers a crime, you are protected. He cannot win a lawsuit against you if that is what you're concerned about.
Yeah. And, like, just considering this, okay? Yes, rich people are scary. You know who's scarier? The US military. And what happens on the World of Tanks subreddit all the time? People leaking top secret information just to prove other people wrong.
It's like, I am in the military, you know.
I have seen this tank and I can prove to you it really looks like that. And you're just like, see, like people would say that for no gain at all, just because people would just tell their friends and family about it. And then their friends and family would go to the press. You don't even have to do it yourself.
Wasn't it on the Minecraft subreddit where the guy published like the secret agent list in different countries, and then they had to like pull out all of these secret agents because the guy on the Minecraft subreddit was like, it wasn't even like the whole Minecraft. It was like a sub thing for a specific server, and the guy was like, no, I can prove to you that I'm in the CIA or something.
Yeah, like, it's just...
People do it for less.
Yeah, it's just silly. And it's also, like, there's a funny aspect to the fact that, like, yeah, all three scenarios are kind of janky. They never finished the house of the murder victim, which is crazy because you feel like that's what the sleuth would investigate.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, billionaires are cheap. They skimp out on a lot of stuff. Yeah, it sucks that there's only like one big exit. And otherwise you have to travel around the whole island to get back. Like, those are funny parts and all, but like...
And otherwise it's okay. This is, again, to also show that Matheson just didn't believe that any of the women would stand up this scenario. He's like, oh, Celia would... Like, probably... For Celia, they didn't even have, like, a set plan. They were like, oh, yeah, at some point we did want you to get killed, but your husband wanted to rape you first.
Yeah.
So, you know... But they didn't even have a plan for her, like a set, you know?
Yeah, they didn't have, like, a game plan on, that's how she's gonna find clues, that's how she's gonna put together information. No, they were just like, yeah, here's a random murder.
It was like... You know, just try it out. Hers was in a sense the most sloppy at all.
Which is crazy if you imagine how expensive this must have been.
Her was the other one. This sounds rude. First story is just one woman. Second story, get 3 for 1. Well, without Cam.
Yeah.
And the last story, you know, you get 10. But the production value with all the actors and everything
it keeps going down.
For Celia's is like a lot higher.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even properly set up shit.
And the thing is that, like, it becomes even sillier when you remember that all of this is over beef on online book forums.
Yes.
Because
Take care, guys.
Be real. There are totally 4chaners who in their fantasies are doing this to every woman they've ever spoken to online. Yeah. But to execute this would have taken years to build. Especially with all the, like, ingrown trees and stuff. Like, the plants were real. So that takes a while. Even if you buy adult trees...
That still takes a while.
It still takes forever. Like, either it takes forever, or it is so noticeable what you're buying and what you're transporting to your own island that, like, no NDA will protect you. Because people can just look at the logs of transactions which are not under NDA and be like, what the shit is he up to? Like, that's suspicious.
Like, they will arrive at some port somewhere. Like, you can make things disappear quite well, especially you have the money, but, like, not this...
There are certain amounts of shit at which point you're like, he's building a whole town on his island?
He's building a forest. He's building a forest that's so far that Allie can't see.
He's building multiple forests, because, like, Celia's... route to work is also through a forest.
Yeah, like, she's driving. She's actually driving through.
Like, can you imagine how expensive this would, and how many people would need to work on it to build it quickly? No NDA in the world would save you.
Like, you could say, okay, maybe some of the trees were already in the island, but that means either Celia's forest is fake or Allie's is fake. Yeah. One forest is fake.
Yeah, and either one, like, setting up a whole forest is so expensive.
Yeah.
And it's just... That's the problem, that, like, it's too crazy to take at face value. Yeah. It is too cartoonish, at which point none of your messaging, like, hits, because it's just like, yeah, okay, but no one does this, right? You can come up with, like, a terrible man who hates women and wants to kill them violently. He doesn't need to set up this shit for it. Yeah. If you want to torture women and hurt them for arguing with you, you don't need to do this. Men don't do this.
But they are not mentally well. All of the men who actually paid the money to get the women there are in itself, in their realistic existence, scarier than Matheson.
Yeah, like, Maggie's ex-husband, who became a coke addict and, like, unpredictable, and broke into her house and threatened to kill her because...
And the child,
because she took his daughter away or whatever. That's scary because that's real. That has happened. Like, women have died because of this.
Regularly. Unfortunately.
And that is fucking... That's real, like...
That's real horror in the way.
Yeah, that has real... that has the scary aspect that would hit. A crazy billionaire setting up insanely expensive, convoluted murder games does not at all.
It's just... And also the way Matheson speaks. Like, as you said, that's something that people incels write in online forums.
They say this to each other. They don't say this to real people they meet.
And, like, there's just... You would have to genuinely be a certain degree of mentally ill to speak like that to another person. Because you just wouldn't. You just wouldn't. And it takes you out so much. Because, I mean, there's a gradual taking out over the book, right? Yeah, we start very realistic with a very uncomfortable feeling that you're accustomed to with the Christina Henry book. It's very on brand. And then it starts to morph into this thing that becomes such a caricature and so unserious in a way. It's like... Also, their whole escape towards the end, it feels so...
The whole thing feels like a tropey horror movie at the end. Yeah. It's so silly. You cannot at any point take it seriously.
The trope subversion doesn't work. Because it's so...
Because also, like, it's not a subversion, because each time your protagonist survives unlikely odds and gets out, and, you know...
That's the trope.
That's what normally happens in these stories. It's not a subversion. at all.
It's just, I don't know. I was disappointed because it didn't feel like a Christina Henry book, in the way that she writes this. She sets up the stories.
I feel like normally she has way more restraint than this. Yeah. I don't know if she just sat down and was like, I'm gonna write something that's explicitly and clearly a feminist story.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the ways men hurt women, and I'm gonna fictionalize it to a degree. But the fictionalization is to a degree where it's like, this is so unreal. Like, this is not a kind of man anyone needs to be scared of. Because this just doesn't happen. And it's not scary, right? If a rich man wants you dead, like a billionaire wants you dead, he doesn't need to build an elaborate murder maze for you. He'll just have someone kill you. And if he hates women right now and needs an outlet, he'll just hire a prostitute, rape her, and kill her after. Like, none of this is necessary, and it's silly.
And the thing is,
it's silly in a bad way.
People have done that. People have had, did get busted by the law for having, and then it was found out that they had, a whole floor of torture rooms or whatever, somewhere in the mountains, where they're all alone. Like this, it does happen, but there's I like a loud book. Iron Widow is so loud and very obvious in the message it wants to portray, but it still works because it's not spelled out like that.
It's also speculative fiction, so whatever it loudly says about its own setting, you still have to, through metaphor, connect to the real world. In this one, it pretends to be set in the real world, at which point you're like, okay, but none of this makes sense.
And it's just, if she had all of these ideas and made a short story collection book, something.
Yeah.
With this overtone of, oh, this is obviously about these feminist issues, and it's uncomfortable in the way that in certain, even if she wanted to go with these types of media, right, the slasher, the dystopia, you could still write it in a way where you realize the obvious sexism that a lot of these stories include.
And also, if this were just a short story anthology without the part 4, it would be stronger. Even if I didn't like story 2 and 3, the reveal makes it worse. Because whatever you can imagine pulls these stories together is more interesting than what it really is.
Yeah.
And I also think these are stronger when we have just one protagonist. For Maggie, obviously Sanya was the best friend.
Yeah,
but she was the sidekick.
Yeah.
And you were pretty sure they were both gonna make it. I was at some point it was okay, I don't think Sanya's gonna die at this point.
Yeah. Or it's very dramatic.
But also with all the women, it's just there is something way scarier when you are isolated in a context that's scary than if you have people you can lean on because you can, right? Because even though Allie was there with friends from the beginning, she was like, these people aren't on my side, they're gonna side with Brad every time. I'm alone here. I have to fight for them to even believe me that, there was a noise, and then they needed to hear the noise, they wouldn't believe me. But for Maggie, it's all these women are in a shady situation. There was one mole, but she didn't really do that much, especially not actively in the story. We just have Maggie's flashback to, oh yeah, there were many moments where actually she put us in danger. And I'm like, but why didn't you show me that?
I genuinely, now that you said it, I genuinely would have liked if we just had them go through the exit. Because then you could also see that as them metaphorically
escaping their story,
escaping that situation, escaping the horror and the expectations
to
and stuff.
Give a face to a man who put them in the situation just makes it so silly.
It feels like I don't know. It's like the overarching thing is like men, not one man, men with an E, right? And then they get to the end of the thing and actually, oh, yeah, men with an E brought us into this, but a man with an A is responsible for all of this.
Yeah. And that's just, like, if you want to comment on how systematically women are oppressed and kept subservient to men and, like, have less options for recourse if they are hurt by men, this is a bad way
of showing it.
To end it.
Yeah.
Because, sure, all the goons are there and they also hate women and have fun hurting women. But, like, I also feel like, yeah, there are also sadists who are women. Like, Beth is not an isolated case. I actually think, like, Beth is, like, a deeply uninteresting version of women who, you know, put other women down in order to get what they want. Because the world is full of them.
Yeah.
And this isn't even an interesting version of that. Like, you can look in any HR department. There are powerful white women keeping black women out of employment.
The crocodile tears. Yeah.
And, like, and just they make the hiring decisions. And if you're, like, disabled or, you know, a person of color or queer and they don't like that, they can just keep you out. And they're not interested in lifting up other women because they've got theirs.
Because they also have this mentality of, I had to go through it, so you have to go through it.
Yeah, and it's like, no, I fought my way to the top. Anyone could do it, and if you can't, that's on you.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's also women who just, like, hurting other people and who like hurting other women. Sure.
There's also shitty women.
But that's so on the nose and uninteresting. Like, Jenny is way more interesting because she's just doing her job, man.
Yeah.
She was just hired as an actor. She's just
it's a bit questionable where she's like...
it's weird. Like, it's a weird thing to do, but as far as she knows, she could have been told that, like, Celia was all for this and she wanted this. She wanted, like, an immersive experience of that. And who are you to ask more questions if you're paid well for, like, an acting job, right? So... you have that, and then in the second one, it really fails because Cam and Madison are so unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because, like, of course there are women who would rather side with their boyfriends over their friends, but it is so extreme here. It's so ridiculous.
Maybe we're lucky that we never met people like this, but it feels very...
Listen, okay?
Artificial.
I don't have a lot of friends, so maybe I just don't get around enough to meet these people.
Yeah.
But there is something so caricaturish about it that it feels wrong. Because these people behave just like the tropey versions of characters in these stories that it's like...
I agree that, like, I feel like even if somebody on the outside is a caricature of something, people usually are complex beings. And even if you like, if it's on purpose portraying that outside, as soon as you get into an extreme situation like this, other parts of your lizard brain take over.
Yeah, and I think this is also what makes the second and third story so much worse. And, like, from reading perspective and stuff, is that in the first one, everyone's an actor. So them being shallow and them being strangely one-dimensional or over the top, like Celia notices with Mrs. Corrigan. It's like, she is too
she's acting the role of her life.
Yeah, it's like, no real woman is this mad and this vitriolic. There needs to be something deeper here, right? And there it's like, yeah, these people are actors. This is why their performances are shallow. This is why they don't seem to have interiority that makes them do different things. But both part 2 and 3 are full of real people who are in the setting of the story, just other people. And them then also following the tropes of the media they're supposed to be in is strange and off-putting and just not good, because you're like, but you're people and people don't behave like this. Even in horror films that, you know, have people behave more realistically like people would behave, there's still an amount of unrealistic behavior because you want a story to be interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the problem if you're writing a story that's trying to be a commentary or a pastiche on like an existing type of story. Because if you still stick to the general idea of how stories go, you end up reproducing the unrealistic parts of what makes these other stories seem unrealistic.
Yeah.
Like, compelling fiction is often not extremely realistic. Because, like, again, with the part where Madison randomly runs into Allie before the end.
Yeah.
Realistically, she would have been somewhere in the woods and run into the wall and realized, oh, this is an enclosed space.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't have been at the door.
Yeah, yeah.
She wouldn't have been around there because Allie hasn't made much sound. How would Madison find her?
Yeah.
The fact that they randomly run into each other while the story is talking about how this all seems like it's said in the story. Like, it is just tanking your suspension of disbelief. How am I supposed to even, like, think about taking the story seriously when it keeps reminding me how unrealistic parts of it are?
Yeah.
Why would you do this?
It's just, I really have a gripe with how even the real humans don't feel like real humans and don't act like real humans. Because that's like, as if I had to pick which of 3 of the stories I would love to read, it'd be Celia's.
For sure.
Not just because of the setup itself, but also because of the way where it makes the most sense. It's the easiest to gang up on one single victim.
Yeah.
So it's the easiest to make that one believe. The fact that Madison and Cam are just insanely stupid helps.
Yeah, and that they're, like, entirely unwilling to ever, like, support Allie.
And they're, like, horny.
Yeah.
You know, that helps. But it's still just strange. And, yeah, what you said, I don't believe that humans would act like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. If you're so focused on getting a message across, it just stops sending the message effectively because people just see that your boogeyman is too unrealistic, right? You can come up with, like, the evilest man possible and not be like, yeah, sure, he sucks, but, like, I don't have a gripe with him because he's not real.
And if we look, like, at the rest of the book, because I also wrote down, it didn't feel like this is not an Alec, like, I'm not saying, okay, it feels like she didn't write it. It does not, like, from the way those sentences are structured. It feels like she wrote the Celia story.
A lot of it reads so much worse than her other books. From a pure craft standpoint, where I was like, was this just not edited? Like, was this just, like, an early draft that should have gone through more iterations? And she threw it out earlier? What is this?
Why is the quality of the story in Celia like
so much better than the other ones?
Yeah. I don't know. Was she very tired when she wrote the rest?
Was Celia's story planned, and then Christina Henry was like, you know what? I don't want to drag this out for 300 pages. I need to add something else to it, and then the rest was an afterthought. Is this what's happening? Because Celia's is also, like, way crazier than the other ones, right? Like, having, like, your memory removed and them trying to implant fake memories and stuff and fake behaviors.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's unrealistic shit.
Yeah.
So it's like, was this first, like, its own thing, and then she was like, oh, I guess I could put this all together with, like, an evil billionaire or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, is this what happened?
Maybe, conspiracy.
Because, like, it just feels like she cared so much more about the first one than the other two. Because the other two really feel so paint by numbers. Yeah. Because they're literally just doing what their genres already do. Yeah. Like, the first one is actually a conversation of the horror of actually being put in a story, and it uses the cozy mystery tropes as, like, fun flavoring. They're there, but they're not ruling the story. Yeah. But the second one just follows the horror tropes. And the third one also has, like, the stock characters you'd have in, like, a death game. Like, the no bullshit lady who hates, like, who's just in it to win it. And you also have the way that people are killed off after the other. Like, the fact that Sanya makes it all the way to the end is so tropey. Like, the first one who dies is, like, the insecure one who, like, complains a lot that people are tired of listening to when she steps on a mine and gets exploded. Ooh. We have the scene where our main character who wants to help people sees someone she tries to help but then realizes she can't and has to leave behind. We have the wonderful trope of an evil person pretending to be disabled in order to garner sympathy. Yeah. And it's like, well, this would be better if any of our main characters were disabled and, like, normal people, but alas, we don't get that. Like, what?
It's just, to give her credit, it's hard if you want to go with what she went with.
This story is hard to execute.
If you already have to give some insight into what is happening during the first third.
Yeah.
The thing is that we get too much insight.
I think also it's like, listen, I applaud her for trying, I suppose. Yeah. This concept is hard to execute well.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's a bad concept. I'm sorry, but functionally, I don't think it's a good idea to imagine people being stuck into their favorite genre of story and that being done by a real life billionaire with real life means.
I would have liked the supernatural aspect.
I think that's bad. I think that's a bad choice. I think that's why you couldn't execute it in a good way, because it's just, I don't think it's possible to do this in a way that doesn't feel stupid.
You have to set it up in a way that makes sense later on, right? You can't just leave out the chat messages, because then in the end, you have to do the whole explaining of, you guys remember that. You can't do that, right? But the same way, the chat messages tell you a bit too much. After the Celia story, you already know what's going on.
Yeah, you read the first chat log of the Allison story and you're like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. Like, the Celia, you're like, and then first, you know, as you said, it's like, oh, you know? And I just, like, craft-wise, meaning-wise, interpretation-wise, feminism-wise, I just don't like the Matheson cop-out. Make it a spirit, make it a ghost, make it a demon, make it just a gaseous form of evil.
Yeah.
Make it nothing, have them just run through the exit.
Not like she has had problems shoehorning a demon into a story that really did not need it at all before. But that's a different story.
But it's, you know, so, like, why
do this?
It feels sloppy. And it pains me to say that about a Christina Henry
and
book.
It does feel a bit like she wrote this while being annoyed at Elon Musk. Because he's running Twitter, and so many authors need to be on Twitter so much that, you know.
I do not doubt that the development around Elon Musk and other people in Silicon Valley has not influenced this. And the overall discussion on incel culture and all of that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Like, men harassing women online is nothing new.
Yeah, and I can imagine she got a fair share.
Even men harassing women online and then trying to dox them and then showing up at their house to hurt them isn't new either, but this is too unrealistic to be scary.
Yeah.
Because if the story for Maggie was like, yeah, her husband is back and he's, like, keeping her captive, or, like, I don't know, like, something.
Yeah.
Right? Her husband's directly responsible. He's, like, abducted her into his house so he could be like, oh, yeah, my wife lives with me again so we can have shared custody of the kid and stuff. Like, that's scary. But this isn't, right? Or, like, a weirdo from your book subreddit showing up at your house. Mm-hmm. Or, like, you getting letters or something to your real-life address referencing shit you said online. That's fucking scary.
I mean,
getting like, swatted, that's fucking scary. Yeah. But this is too stupid. Like,
I mean, the Celia thing, the guy who got her there was somebody who was annoyed and pissed that she actually went to HR after he assaulted her.
Where I'm also like, are we gonna get details on who he was in her life?
That was the only thing we
Yeah,
get.
I know, and I was like, I want closure on like the Celia bits. What do you mean?
And that's like, there would have been ways to make it's fiction, it's outrageous, right? But there would have been ways to make it more scary if we had a bit more of the real underlying traumas that are behind these stories.
It does to some degree feel like someone who doesn't actually understand what the problem, like how online harassment becomes a real life problem and real life scary for anyone, but especially women who are like online. I think it would also have made more sense if if all of them had been some like big name fan or like YouTuber or something with their face out there with like, so that somebody could be way madder at them. Because sure, you get mad at other people in chat or whatever.
Yeah.
But this feels too extreme. There's a level of hatred that becomes scary online that really only happens if you have any kind of established presence, when people recognize you again and again somewhere.
Yeah.
Be that like in video, like they don't even need to be huge influencers or whatever. They could just be a big name fan whose posts get a lot of interaction and like stuff like that. But that doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Yeah.
They're just normal users who don't really, they're in forums and like this random guy starts fights with a lot of people, but that's just, I'm also like, how did he find people in their lives willing to pay for them?
He is a big money guy. You know, he can...
But how do you ask those... Like, how do you go up to a guy and be like, hey, would you pay me $50K to get rid of your wife?
I think there's... Well, we wouldn't walk up to them like that. But I think the same way that it took ages to build that complex, you can do some social engineering with these guys.
Yeah, you can, but it's like a kind of convoluted way to get at the problem.
Of course.
Where it's just like, but also if you're a billionaire, why care if these people will give you money? Like, I'm sorry, but like billions are amounts of money where you
I think that in a way is like a plot hole, but I think they put that in there to show that in the lives
these men also are,
it's like a screwed up version of if he wanted to, he would. Yeah. You know, if he had the option, like, of doing this, I think some, not just men, I think some humans, people, if they were to fantasize about stuff like this, and that'd be like you could, you could.
Yeah.
And I think some people are like, you know what, I would. I would do that.
Absolutely. And like, yes, it's there to prove that like other men are also culpable for what has happened and stuff like that. But it also feels like, why would he only settle for people who can pay him, right? Because then this crosses out like a huge chunk of women he could violently kill.
Yeah, but he had like a specific beef with these.
But like, no, but he did mention that he had beef with like hundreds of people online and just chose those because someone in their surrounding could pay for it. Where I'm just like, okay, but what if you really, really have beef with this poor woman? What do you do then?
I think one more like addition to, because it's also in the question in the back, is that would add more realism, is we would need a phase of them actually not being believed by the executive. Like, if you're being stalked, it's extremely difficult to have the stalker be prosecuted, because something needs to happen first. Next to the people not believing you because, whatever, for whatever reasons, sometimes not reason at all. The same, and the book in the end asks you, how do they utilize this, women not being believed? But we don't really have that.
Yeah, it's
like the biggest gaslighting, of course, is Celia's whole story, but she's not walking up to anyone.
But also with Celia's story, it's also just like, I understand women are often not believed, and there is a preponderance of like women being called delusional or whatever for, saying things where other people are like, I don't think that's true. But what Celia's story is really like more like is people with psychosis, which is not at all a gendered phenomenon, because people who experience psychosis are like, no, I don't believe this is right. Like I are not believed across the board. It does like that's there. It's like this isn't even a feminist issue. This is like a disability rights issue, or like mental illness rights issue, where it's like it is difficult because what do you do with a person who strongly believes things that you know are wrong? Like you cannot believe, because often people who experience very intense psychosis, there are times when they don't know that what they believe is wrong. Like people who experience intense paranoia or whatever, or even people who just have anterograde and retrograde amnesia at once, who are like, I don't remember who I was, but my brain also cannot really encode new memories. So every day I wake up not knowing who I am, and like I can't trust anyone. Like, how do you deal with it? Like, of course people will treat you differently, but this is not at all analogous to any real feminist issue. This isn't about women at all.
And
right, like
if you put that at the very end of the book of like, oh, they will not believe you, I do not feel that dread. Like, put that dread and scare more into all of the stories.
I feel like maybe just an epilogue where you just have, you know, Celia sitting in like a kitchen where she's like, yeah, this is familiar, but also I don't really remember this either. And also I can never feel safe here again because I was taken from you before. And you can have Allie, who's like, I have talked to Cam again, but she doesn't believe me. And she'll stay with her boyfriend, and there's nothing I can do. And, like, I don't know what Brad would do to me if I stayed. Yeah. So I had to move, like, to the other side of the country and start fresh entirely. And I'm, like, not talking to anyone anymore who I used to know, not even my family, because I don't, you know, want them to get in trouble. And you can have Maggie, who's just like, my husband's insane, but no one will believe that this happened to me.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, something where you have them sitting there and just being like, I can't do anything.
Or if you really want to gut punch them, you know, have an epilogue that's like, no, still people didn't believe her. You know, the island was in shambles. It was blown, like, it looked like an accident.
No, you just have news of like, oh yeah, a tech billionaire found dead after taking swim around his island or something, or like boating accident.
Trying to leave island because there was electric failure, it blew up.
Yeah, or just like on a joyride, whatever. Like, where nothing bad about him is said at all, and nothing is referencing, and like there are like. They look into like the other women who died in the death game, and like their cases are just like, yeah, sometimes women go missing, whatever. Yeah. Like just that would be way stronger.
If you want to go with like the negative ending.
Like, I understand that this is a hopeful ending, but really it doesn't really engage with what had happened before and what the implications for their lives are. Yeah. And that's why it's bad that this is such a tropey story, because it's trying to comment on stories and real life. And it manages to do neither, because, like, oh, it's nice to have a happy ending or a hopeful ending. But it doesn't work if you're also talking openly and clearly about how rich men get away with anything. And, like, yes, Matheson died. He did get something. Like, they got, like, some sort of revenge. But this isn't gonna save them in the long run of how ruined their lives are now. Yeah. Like, they can have a support group together. You could like end it with like a chatlock between them or whatever.
The interesting thing is there is actually a book out that's like the last girl.
Yeah, the final girl support group.
Final girl support group. That's just about that idea. I haven't read it yet. I have no idea whether it's good. But like, I think overall for me, I can sum up this whole thing that I commend her for going for these issues and wanting to like portray them and show them, but at some time she quite literally lost the plot, and it leaves me with more with more negative associations than positive ones.
It just also, and I can't speak to that. I don't know what Christina Henry reads or watches, but I know that there is a lot, and especially in the last few like years, last decade, whatever, there's a lot of horror that deals with feminist issues and that is feminist and that is good and like, you know, even like self-referential and deals with horror tropes and stuff. This feels lazy. It doesn't feel like it's at all engaging with like horror that has been newer and that is more recent. It's like more a comment on like movies that came out in the 70s and 80s, and that's like fine, you can do whatever you want, but it does feel, it feels lazy. And I think that's a thread that runs through both stories that are not Celia's. I think they feel lazy and not well thought through because, again, they're just reproducing the same tropes that they're supposed to be, like, commenting on in some way. Like,
it's,
it just, like, it's not, like, it's trying, but it's not managing at all. And I think it's a thing where I'm like, I don't think I would know what to change to execute this better, because I think at the end the whole idea is flawed and won't yield a satisfying result.
It's just the whole thing is it's dystopian in the way that Maggie says, oh, I'm into the dystopian story where people are being put into a death game, and that's literally what he does with them. I mean, you can't call it a game, but like he puts them into like that dystopian situation, and that makes it unreal.
It is scary to be like, oh my god, what if your offhanded comments online like made an incredibly powerful entity put you into a story just like that? Wouldn't that be scary? And I was like, that would be scary, because it's entirely unrealistic for that to ever happen.
Are there countries and leaderships and like oppressive, you know, systems out there in this world right now that will prosecute you for comments made online against these systems? Of course, but like not.
They're not putting you in a dystopian death game, though. They're putting you in prison.
They're putting you in like in a camp where you will die miserably.
Yeah, they put you in a prison or a work camp.
So it's like.
Or they just kill you. Like a lot of people who get disappeared are just killed.
You'll jump out of a window.
You know, it's just like, this is so, it's too silly. It's too cartoonish to.
There's due to the Megalopolis movie, a lot of people are currently handing out the one quote from Family Guy where Peter says. He doesn't like The Godfather because it insists upon itself, and people throw that around with Megalopolis, and I feel like, you know what, this book, it insists upon itself.
It's just don't. I mean, if you want to read a text that wants to be feminist but falls short, I guess you can read this, but I wouldn't recommend that.
I'd say close the book when you see in big letters Ellie or Allison.
One or the other.
Close the book. You've read the best part.
You read the good part. Just don't bother with
I mean, if you can get it in a library or something, knock yourself out. But even then, I'd be like, nah.
Again, it's not a satisfying read. Like, I've read books that were like middling, but there was an ending part where I was like, oh, this brings it around to the beginning. Thematically I like this is interesting, even if the execution was kind of lackluster. I'm just like, why'd you do this to me?
I think if I had to rate it, I would actually give it like a 2 out of 5. And most, which sounds horrific if you think which other books I gave a 3, but which is mostly due to her detriment of me liking her other books so much that I'm just so disappointed.
Interesting. I would give it a 3-star. I'm like, I'm not, like, reading it wasn't painful, right? It was still a quick read.
Ellie's part was painful for me. But
Ellie's part wasn't great, but I personally, like, I already don't like dystopian, and then, like, that section, I was so exhausted. I was like, this is getting stupider and stupider. So I was not having fun there, but I still think that, like, it's a perfectly serviceable book. So I think a 3-star is the...
I'll go with a
Especially
2.5.
I like the first part so much where I'm like, you know what, this part was really good.
Yeah.
And the rest is like, eh. Like, even if I don't like Ellie, I think, like, it's not a terrible idea. Like, the beginning parts were suspenseful.
It was.
And it is, and, like, I did like the tension of, like, you're alone in the woods with 4 people who you can't trust.
Like, 2 of those.
You don't know what kind of games they want to play. One with them is, like 3 seconds away from, like, violently assaulting you. Sexually or non-sexually.
You know,
like, you are not safe. Like, that's an interesting story. Even without a slasher, that's like, that's compelling. But then it went downhill, and I, like, the dystopian section, I was like, I guess fine. I just don't really care for dystopian, but there's nothing really that wrong with how it's written. And then the final section is just like,
the final section really did a doozy on me.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that concludes our thoughts on this. Honestly, I didn't need to have this first experience for our book podcast.
No, me neither. I wish I could have continued saying, oh, I haven't read a Christina Henry book I didn't like.
Oh, well.
But now I'm like, oh, well, you really can't just trust an author's name. You just gotta, be prepared for disappointments at any junction.
And it sucks because this was the reason why I didn't pick up The House that Horror Built.
Yeah.
Because I've been burnt now. And
I don't
like to be burnt.
It's totally understandable, yeah.
Well, if you guys have also read the book, feel free to please write into the comments what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to hear what other people took away
because
from
maybe
it.
we both had a whoosh, and
maybe we are just too stupid. Maybe this book is too high level for us. This is absolutely possible. Yeah. But I doubt it, but
I'm self-conscious, so I kind of do believe it close. I don't know. But yeah, if you have other thoughts or also similar thoughts, write them in the comments. We're excited to see.
Yeah, it's a delight to read them every time.
Yeah. All right. Hope you have a fun spooky season so far.
Yeah.
And bye-bye.
Goodbye.